Is it time to revisit another strange title from my childhood? Damn right it's time to revisit a strange title from my childhood. I feel as if I can blame Monotonal Lizard's Jurassic Park retrospective for this one. As for his Herculean task, he had to more or less witness this oddity, and suffice it to say, he didn't very much like it, which is a fair assessment, especially in the realms of fighting games, as this ain't no heavy hitter of the genre. In fact, it was a specter looming in the shadow of two of the crown jewels of the arcades: Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes and Tekken 3. But much like a lot of oldies from my more formative years, the Maturian agent had already moved into place awaiting a keyword or signal. In this scenario, one man's mammoth task of covering all the JP games, good and decidedly bad. There was that one time that Maximilian covered it for his PlayStation 1 retrospective, but I hadn't started really making vids at that point, so back into the ether Warpath went. So with that said, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share the video around. Or don't. I'm not your Uncle June who will accidentally splatter himself with an Alzheimer's milkshake. While the tale of DreamWorks Interactive is a fascinating subject tied to the mind of Steven Spielberg leading to the first Medal of Honor, that story isn't this. In fact, we very much concern ourselves with something far away from the grandeur of that. NASA.
Pose.
Hang on. Yeah, that's where we start, or at least in that field as we focus on one José Villeta. José's background centers around aeronautical engineering, earning his undergraduate and master's in the field way before going into the gaming industry. In fact, peeping his LinkedIn page has his first proper job listed as member of technical staff at Rockwell International for the X-31 aircraft. Fancy stuff, though in his off time away from groundbreaking experiments, José was a simple guy who liked to tinker and play with video games. Taken from Latin Post's interview with José, he tells the website when asked the hard swerve from engineering to video game development this: "I was always a gamer, from the arcade machines to the Atari days to my first gaming computer, the Commodore 64. During my time in California, I spent lots of weekends building video games as a hobby with my colleagues from MIT Media Lab. It was fun to not only play the latest games, but also learn how to make them. It was from this hobby that the boys at MIT would branch off into a new path. All their fiddling led to a work-in-progress volleyball title for the Super Nintendo that they wanted to shop around. Catching wind of this project was Virgin Interactive, who saw their potential from where they came from, as it was just a couple of admittedly smart dudes basically joshing around with development, and gave them a contract for an original title on the PlayStation 1. Back to Latin Post, José recalls once we got a Nintendo SNES volleyball prototype working, we went around pitching it to publishers, but Virgin Games decided they had bigger plans for us. They wanted for us to build a dream team based on our MIT Media Lab colleagues and build our first game around launch of the original PlayStation. We started Black Ops out of our home until we moved to our offices in Santa Monica. 'Twas the style at the time, and it goes without mentioning, MIT is the top of the top. A lot of technological advancements come from the institution, so it wasn't exactly a dumb decision on Virgin's behalf, doubly so since José would wind up using his experiences at NASA for Black Ops' first title, Agile Warrior, and ultimately he would rise up the ranks of Black Ops, becoming the director for Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines? Yeah, there's a funny trend with Black Ops, as Agile Warrior could honestly be called Ace Combat at Home, as the original title in that series, Air Combat, got a console release the same year as Agile Warrior, 95. Don't worry, these comparisons don't stop with this title. Black Ops' whole collection reeks with this funk. In fact, this is the most interesting part about the company's history. How much they get overshadowed. Outside of their next two titles, Black Dawn and Treasures of the Deep, which both did quite well, Black Ops would incidentally get trapped in the licensed hole starting with Knockout Kings in '99, which they developed for EA. Or as most of you would come to know it as after the series was basically rebooted, the Fight Night franchise. What more laughs? After Warpath, the topic of today's video, Black Ops would develop Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough on PlayStation 1, two of the weaker James Bond games, with Eurocom's port of World far outshining its technically superior brother, and GoldenEye still the rage, not giving Tomorrow Never Dies a chance in the public eye. It's average at best. Then there's the likes of Street Hoops and And 1 Street Ball way later in Black Ops' existence. Worse off versions of the NBA Street series. Yeah, that contract with EA after Treasures really put Black Ops into a bind when the former realized they could do everything in-house with subsidiaries. Still, could be worse. There's the Resident Evil knockoff X-Files Resist or Serve, the aforementioned T3, and the holy grail of, holy shit, why was this developed? America's 10 Most Wanted. Again, better known as Fugitive Hunter. The game where you roundhouse kick Osama bin Laden. Oh, the places you'll go. In all honesty, there isn't much in the way of documentation for Warpath, and I'm assuming that the whole reason for the development of the project was because JP Mania was still a thing, and not wanting to pull resources away from the A-Team for a side project, DreamWorks let EA put Black Ops up to the task. Compare this to the actual Lost World game, and the difference is night and day. Lost World was a '97 title, while Warpath a '99 release, both on the PlayStation 1, so there may have been some overlap. We know Michael Giacchino did the scores for both titles, so who knows if the interactions stop there. Kinda makes this whole tab incomplete, but them's the breaks. At least I can look at the old Black Ops website to see what they say about Warpath. Warpath breaks new ground in a variety of areas, providing hardcore and mass-market gamers alike with a reach alternative in the stagnant fighting genre market. Oh no. Locked to the PlayStation 1, I busted out EPSXE as my emulator of choice. Now this is a little bundle of straws. Technically speaking, there is no story in Warpath, which isn't exactly uncommon of older fighting games, which typically had a loose plot explaining why the cast is fighting each other. Capcom's Versus series, from conception with X-Men Children of the Atom to around Marvel vs. Capcom 2, came with a transparent plot more see-through than glass, but wasn't a strike against the titles. In today's day and age, we've been real spoiled with story modes, as seen with a majority of Arc System Works titles, particularly Guilty Gear and BlazBlue, but a fighting game lacking a narrative just has never felt like a detriment to me. This is where my time in the arcades shines through, as you weren't really grinding out a cabinet for the plot. Or in my case, watching people grind out Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, as I have seen that in the wild in my younger years. Whether casual or competitive, you wanted to dunk on someone, with lore a bonus if the game had any, like Akuma in Super Turbo, or all the rest of the colored ninjas like Ermac, Reptile, and Rain in Mortal Kombat. However, this is where I try to grab ye straw, as the end-round recaps and continue screen paint a picture that someone, possibly InGen or Biosyn, is stalking the dinosaurs in an attempt to capture them for some purpose. Best is implication and assumption. as I can hazard a theory that Warpath is taking elements from both JP movies and books at the time, Aidari, the eponymous story, and Lost World, as the dinosaurs fighting all around the Atlantic Hemisphere might be a reference to the escaping dino subplot in the first book, and the hunters poaching in the sequel. Bing Bang Boom, it would explain the ring announcer and all the arenas as the coordinator of the capture/relocation operation, moving/pushing the player-selected dinosaur into different areas. At that point, life finds a way to explain why 2 Cretaceous period or earlier or later animals want to maim, outlast, and possibly consume the other. There's the bend, though, to complete this straw analogy. My pedantic mind is filling in too many blanks. Nothing is outright stated or confirmed in a meaningful way, thus the technicality I have to suck up with this bendy straw. But hey, some of the best fighting games don't sell themselves to you on narrative importance, but style and play. Let me just get this out of the way first. The music is exactly what you think it is. That's not entirely a bad thing. Jurassic Park and some media connected to Lost World, more specifically the video game adaptation on PlayStation 1, have great orchestral scores, but the problem of personal persuasion lies in the context of the fighting game genre. You really have to stand out amidst the crowd when the likes of Capcom, Namco, and Arc System Works are the norm. Themes both old and new have been burned into the memory space of my head where adolescent recollections should reside, so Warpath landing in the okay to good territory is detrimental, as fighting game music isn't simply okay or good.
Get the containment room.
Final battle. Fight! Final battle. Fight!
Round 2, fight! You win.
手間取っちまった。
Point.
Phenomenal is the baseline since Super Turbo by the means of how I judge a fighting game OST, and there just isn't anything that sticks an earworm into my head like This Is True Love Making from Capcom vs. SNK 2 or Crowded Street from Third Strike. But just because I'm biased in this sense, that doesn't mean the production of Warpath's soundtrack is bad. It's still orchestral in an era where that wasn't the norm. You can tell Michael Giacchino, who also handled the music for The Lost World on PlayStation 1, has a clear, distinct ear for how this series should sound, no matter the format, with what was laid out by John Williams in the first movie. Fun fact as a tangent, and now I feel like I'm ripping off the monotonal lizard video, Giacchino would replace Williams for the Jurassic World half of the series. Tense strings and raucous horns earmark many of the battle themes, as if to encapsulate the terror and weight of these ancient, violently majestic creatures. Overall, it is also quite naturalistic, with ambient nature sounds joining the harmonics as if to highlight that nature has taken back over. This is a tie-in to Lost World more than Jurassic Park, so it is neat that the soundtrack does attempt to play to that movie's themes in its own way, however minor. But enough about the music, let's get to the big ol' meat and potatoes. The model work and animation. These are relatively nice 3D models in an era where 3D fighters, hell, even regular 3D games, could be quite boxy or bad looking. This is especially notable because Black Ops Entertainment was a small studio. The likes of Capcom, Namco, and Sega had the budget to experiment with 3D for their fighters with mixed results. It took until Tekken 3 to smooth out the edges, so for a majority of the dinosaurs in Warpath to look as good as they do is miraculous. Granted, I do think it's at the cost of the arenas, as most of them are circular Thunderdomes with a few interactables here and there, but don't take this as too much of a criticism, as, again, 3D fighters were pretty barren at the time. Continuing with the comparison, as it's been a running theme with this video and is kinda necessary when covering less mainstream fighters, Tekken 4 is when we got stage variation and walls as a mechanic, so it's not like Warpath is deviating from the crowd in a negative way. It's playing follow the leader. But back to the dinosaurs, apart from the ones that look like their film counterparts, the Rex, Raptor, Anki, and Trike all look great apart from a few weird scale issues with their models, which this whole game has a strange size problem, we have quite a few on offer that were either originally seen within the books or are making a debut within the franchise. It's funny seeing the likes of the Spinosaurus and Giganotosaurus here first, as they would become features for Park 3 and World Dominion with wildly different looks, Spino getting the brunt of it because of how much understanding of his biology has changed. He went from a weird raptor-like creature here to rivaling the T-Rex in 3 to getting closer to his Suchomimus and Baryonyx cousins in reality. I think that's the major reason why the model work is so great. Black Ops sticks to the framework that the first two movies and books do when displaying the dinosaurs as animals. There's some concessions here and there, but they haven't completely fallen off the wagon into nonsense territory. The later movies have gotten away from that, making me and someone from the inner circle very sad. The dinosaurs just don't feel like animals in those later movies, okay? There's a reason why the museum allows you to get up close and personal with the selected dinosaurs. They are a marvel of the era, only beaten out by the likes of some of the other JP games or Dino Crisis. But what those other earlier JP games don't have is the gore system. Keeping to this realism angle I've presented, every fighter suffers when they get hit, from slash and claw marks appearing on backs or legs to wide gashes on throats or backs. It doesn't feel over the top in the way that Mortal Kombat is, nor does it skimp out on the violence like other bloodless fighters. The fights in Warpath feel like a natural struggle between two animals over territory or food. Survival is the word. What's more, and this is my favorite detail, whenever you lose an arcade and continue, the scars and wounds on both you and your opponent don't disappear until you actually win and move on to the next rung in the ladder. I am a big sucker for battle damage over time, a character going from clean and pristine to a disheveled mess, so the fact that Warpath does this is a feather in its cap.
Never count this one out as long as he has a pulse.
Final battle. Fight!
There is a good mixture of fan-favorite dinosaurs and newbies, so you're bound to get attached to one. As I knew when I was a child, I was well beyond interested in what a Stygimoloch was because it's such an oddball dinosaur. And the fact that it does all these flips and tricks and what have you makes it fun to watch in action, another positive stretched across the whole cast. Not only do these dinos look good with attention to detail model work, the animation for them is astounding. While there is some sharing between a few of the dinosaurs, Spino and Raptor, Trike and Styrax, Stiggy and Packy, it feels like Black Ops worked within the limitations of what dinosaurs can and can't do to create movesets for the cast, with only some dipping into creative freedoms. Details like how a lot of the dinosaurs' crouching attacks are bites or claw swings instead of low punches or kicks, with some members of the cast taking full advantage of natural parts of their anatomy as weapons. The Sucho focuses on a lot of claw attacks because of the razors it has, while the Raptor loves swinging its feet around due to the talon. That's not to say that all of the animations look fantastic, some are downright goofy. The Giga's kicks I doubt are possible, so even though aesthetically its kick attacks look good, there's no model tearing or anything out of place, I think logically it feels awkward in the same way that the Trikes or Styrax crouching horn jabs are animated. Very stubby. I guess I can handwave this with a case of artistic freedom, as it is rather hard to come up with a moveset for a dinosaur that takes its reality into consideration, though how much you want to uphold or suspend that is up to you. For me, the Alberto's commando role it does for its intro will always be the height of goofiness in Warpath because it feels so out of place. Either this, or Cryo's fucking Psycho Crusher dash attack, which is taking the piss. But damn, do I find it hilariously cool every time I see it.
Final battle. Fight!
Psycho Crusher! Psycho Crusher!
Rounding out with sound, outside of the announcers, who do a fine enough job, most of what is carrying the game is the Foley work and dinosaur cries, both of which are excellent for the most part. Attacks sound meaty, and the dinosaurs sound like they should if they've appeared in a previous JP entry, see Rex and Raptor, or go with a vocalization that sounds fitting. Sucho's bellows hit this close to alligator as befitting for the mimic and things of that nature. The only one to stand out in a bad way is Stiggy, as that's just a deer. They don't mask it or anything. An outlier amidst the rest, even with a few odd vocalizations here and there like the Alberto's whine when performing combos. However, sound mixing is a whole nother issue, as this is right dab in the middle of the poor mixing time period. This game is loud, so much so that I, for the first time since I've begun recording video games, have seen OBS redline on audio. Mostly during the fights and not the menus, all themed to a rundown Jurassic Park or Site B, which makes them fun to click through, so you might want to adjust before your eardrums are blown out. But other than that, for a tie-in game from a smaller studio, Warpath sits pretty well with a solid presentation. Warpath Jurassic Park is a 4-ish, more on this later, button fighting game. Last time I played a fighting game was Kamen Rider Kuga on PlayStation 1, which is more of a fan-servicey venture than a serious fighter. Hell, my layout of that video personally enforces that idea, but Warpath is wanting to measure up to others in the industry. With that, I get to teach you about numeric annotation, or more a subset of that concept. But before that, let's go over the usual details. On the difficulty side of things, yep, this is absolutely a fighting game. If you've never played one, the AI starts off relatively easy on either easy or normal, but as you go down the line in arcade, your opponents steadily get more advanced until they start reading inputs and generally make you question why you even played the game in the first place. Warpath doesn't hit the same level of infamy that other fighters do, Fatal Fury or King of Fighters this isn't, but to capstone this explanation, the game defaults to easy when you first boot it up. That says a lot. And if you are wondering, while on easy and normal, the AI doesn't bust out too many dial-up combos when you start off in arcade, saving them for later, on hard they do. Another little morsel for the proper time, Warpath has a few modes to select from, though there are some unlocks. So while from the beginning you have access to arcade, practice, and versus, you have to beat the latter at least once to get team, choice, and survivor. By the by, arcade is the standard 8 opponents in a row mode, practice is exactly what it sounds like, versus is the 2-player mode, team is like the previous except you build teams of up to 4 dinosaurs, choice allows a single player to fight against the computer, and survivor is a gauntlet mode. Pretty standard stuff across the board, though there's also a museum for those that want a bit of biographical fact with their extinct animals. With most of the fluff out of the way, let's get to the dinosaurs. 8 are available from the get-go, who I'll dub the top rowers, while you have to finish arcade on any difficulty multiple times to get the 6 bottom rowers, giving a total of 14 animals to choose from. There are a good number of arenas as well, taken from all over the first 2 movies, and a few original spots too. Usually what changes is size and hazards, though all maps typically stay to a circular shape without any traditional walls, so no wall bouncing or crumples. More Street Fighter's corners than Tekken's walls. Without changing the options, as you can customize match rulings, each fight is a 60-second bout with the first player to 2 rounds won the victor. That means matches can go as short as 2 rounds to up to a maximum of 4 if you, the CPU, or another player trade rounds. Of course, like with a majority of fighting games, the one who runs out of health first loses the round, though in a timeout scenario, whichever player has the most health wins the round. Now, when you do select a dinosaur to play as, you can adjust handicap, but I don't know what that does. I think it might affect starting health values. As stated at the top, Warpath is a 4-button fighter. Kinda. Okay, so Warpath uses the same system as Tekken, as the face buttons can be split into 2 groups, punches and kicks, or as Warpath calls them, main and second attacks. For sake of simplicity, I will stick with punches and kicks, as this is consistent with Tekken notation, which Warpath assumes and makes this next point easier to wrap your mind around. Each of these buttons is assigned a number. Square and triangle, punches 1 and 2, will be declared as 1 and 2 going forward. X and circle, meanwhile, kicks 1 and 2 are 3 and 4. While this gives the faces their functions, the stick and the triggers have yet to be clarified, mostly because the triggers all perform actions in Warpath that are either handled by the stick in Tekken or are options unique to Warpath. As such, R1 is hold block like Mortal Kombat, no holding back to block like in Street Fighter, sadly. R2 is taunt and rampage attack modifier, while L1 and L2 sidestep towards or away from the screen. With the buttons noted, let's move to the stick, as it has quite a few directions you can point it in. 9 in fact. Neutral, forward, up, down, back, down forward, down back, and up back. Where the stick is pointing when you press a button is key, as it determines what attacks will come out, leading to character movesets. Getting this out of the way first, there are universal options for all the characters, being the grabs and jump attacks. Pressing 1 and 2, 1 and 3, or 2 and 4 leads to a grab either focusing mid for 1 and 2, or low for 2 and 4, or a launcher in 1 and 3's case. Aside, attacks technically come out in 3 areas, low, mid, and high, but in all reality, the only attacks that have the high modifier are jump attacks, which are all collectively awful and only good for hard knockdowns. You ain't doing jump-ins or cross-ups in Warpath, and being hit in the air causes a hard knockdown regardless of what hit you. 3 and 4 is the odd one out, as it is a pin move similar to Super Turbo's Hold Throws, in which you mash the face buttons to do more damage, but you can only pin an opponent if they are knocked down. The defender can mash out of a pin as well to lessen the damage, so as an Oki option, use discretion. While covering hard knockdowns, Oki, fully known as Okizeme, boils down to a few options. Fast get up, wake up attack, or nothing. You are not invulnerable when knocked down, meaning an opponent can hit you with either neutral or crouching moves, as some standing neutrals hit both mid and low, and some crouching attacks have great range, making Oki not only an important part of Warpath, but also a frustrating one at that. More on this in the bad tab. While each dinosaur does have a variety of moves, some do share inputs, which for the most part are either the hold direction attacks or just frame moves. Things like Megaraptor's forward and 1 and Sucho's forward and 1 having the same input but being different attacks with different properties. Just frame moves are a bit harder to explain, as instead of instantly putting in the button combinations, options like the dash attacks, which are forward, then 1 and 4 don't require timing, just frames are exact. T-Rex's stomach, jab, and delayed tail whip, forward, and 4, and down, back, and 2, respectively, need those second inputs to be timed properly. I don't know if they are frame 1 links, as in you only get 1 frame to put in the second half of the command, and if just frames and 1 frames are the same thing, but the timing for these moves are strict enough for me to not pull them off no matter how many times I tried. They might not be just frames, but the inputs are eerily similar to Electric Wind God Fist, which is a just frame, and with how much Warpath is like to Tekken, that explains my reasoning. Away from this nonsense, dash attacks knock down and can't be blocked. Save this for later. With blocking's coverage, standing block protects against mid and high attacks, while crouching block protects mid and low. Switching between the two is quite responsive, though I almost never saw the reason to not block low. High attacks are too much of a gamble and are seen from a mile away. Plus, they have some garbage hitboxes and frames, like either hitting way too close to be effective or having too much startup and getting beaten out by other air-to-airs or ground attacks. I hope you have a predilection for fighting game terminology. Basically, air attacks have way too much startup and India lag to be useful, i.e. they come out too slow and you return to neutral after one way too slow, and blocking has no block stun, as in you can almost immediately act after blocking a move. So overheads just suck because you can't put them into mix-ups. While you can throw out moves themselves, there do exist combos of two varieties, target and dial-in. All dinosaurs have both, though the latter of the two are the more intricate combos. Generally, with every dinosaur, you have a 2-hit target combo like with Rexy's 1-1 or Giga's 1-2. In fact, all the characters have a good few target combos based on which button you press first that act as utility options, mostly to layer on some damage, stop approaches, or build rage. Dial-in/dial-up combos, meanwhile, are 2 a pop to each character. As the name suggests, with a dial-in combo, you press the buttons in sequence like a rotary phone to get the combo. Speed does matter as you have to do it fast enough, though it isn't one frame. For example, Cryo's combo 2 is 2-3-1, 2-3-4-4. As long as you input that sequence fast enough, the combo will come out, though missing a button press or pressing the wrong button will drop it. Combos 1 and 2 for each dinosaur end with an unblockable knockdown, meaning you are punished for blocking and can only really sidestep to avoid them. Not all dial-ins share inputs, however, as these are separated kinda sorta into categories. All the large theropods lack directional inputs in their combos 1 and 2. Sucho, Raptor, Spino, and most of the herbivores start theirs off with forward and a button press, while Mr. Lonely Anki has his begin with holding back and a button. Imperative: for these combos that begin with forward or back with a button, you have to return the stick to neutral. So Sucho's combo 2, it's forward and 1, 3-4-2, 1-3-4, but it will drop if you continue to hold forward after forward and 1 when going to press 3. Last on the docket of moves are the rampage attacks. Whenever you land either 2 or 4 moves, so combos and input normals like forward and 2, you'll build up rage until you enter rampage mode. While you are invulnerable when entering it, any move that knocks down forces you out of rampage. That said, holding R2 and pressing a face button does a rampage attack, a move that deals high amounts of damage and is unblockable. Each character gets 2 rampage attacks based on what button you press, and while a round usually ends when someone hits rampage because of the high damage of said attacks, if enough time passes without a knockdown, a dinosaur will exit rampage automatically. Rage also drops after a while if you don't land 2s or 4s. That about covers the dinosaurs, leaving a few oddities here and there like the edibles. No, not those ones. When turned on in the options, a few arenas will have a compy human or dog run into the chaos, acting as a snack to munch on if hit with a biting or head attack from a character. This is a not so minor heal, though you are more than likely to launch these sad edibles into the stratosphere or squish them. A few stages have hazards to be mindful of as well, like rocks or explosives that do a fair bit of damage when knocked into or jumped on. For these next 2 tabs, there's going to be a split between good stuff unique to the game and fighting game jargon. So basically, aspects that are unique to the title that make it good, and fighting game specifics that make certain moves, characters, what have you good. Starting with the latter first, for as kinda rough as a fighter this is, there are some damn good buttons. Only a few dinos have some truly garbage movesets that lack any real match usage. Sorry, Anki, you're low tier with your bad moves and poor frame data. 2 moves I think of when it comes to showcasing how great some of these dinosaurs are Raptor and Spino's neutral 1 and Giga's down 1. Raptor and Spino have an unbelievably good poke that you just kinda have to respect. Not only is it one of the fastest moves in the game, with pretty negligible startup and ending lag, it targets into itself, easily punishing any poor approaches. This synergizes well with both their forward and 1s, which lunge out a good distance and leads into both their dial-ins. A few of their command normals close the gap, so to speak, making it a mind game no matter the range. Coupled with the speed of both, and the two become hit-and-run monsters, not giving an inch as they control the neutral, either with backdashes to reset into neutral to control it, or with side steps to position into a hard knockdown. Of all the dinosaurs as well, Spino and Raptor have the only good jump attacks as they aren't restrained by the usual downsides that jump-ins and Warpath have. Good reach, speed, and hitboxes ensures that hitting up on the stick wasn't a mistake. Granted, there is some balance to the two that don't make them overtly powerful, as their Oki options stink. I know this may seem weird to put that statement into the good section, but trust me, balance is key when it comes to a fighter, otherwise you get the likes of Pet Shop or Kakyoin for heritage. Icicles and nets. Icicles and nets! They'll find me dead with icicles and nets scribbled across the walls. Raptor and Spino struggle to capitalize on a hard knockdown outside of pinning, as their crouching attacks are short-ranged, and their fantastic pokes, while able to hit a knockdown opponent, lack in the damage capacity. You trade a part of your game to maximize other aspects of it, the Raptor and Spino getting good control when standing to frustrate an opponent into mistakes, like a stally projectile user. Giga, on the other hand, is all about the aggression. Down 1 for Giga is possibly the best move in the game, as it's a low poke with the damage of a sweep that hits halfway across the screen. Sweeps in other fighters hit the hardest, so for a modest committal move to carry that same damage is unbelievable. A good flowchart for Giga is go for knockdown with whatever, his decent dash attack or great combo 1 or 2, then spam down 1 as there's no way to punish it. Even when standing in neutral, it comes out so quick and hits low that it can easily control space. It's a move like Raptor and Spino's neutral 1 that you throw out during a lull in action to catch unsuspecting opponents. But what's more, most of Giga's buttons are great, with the only lacky moves being a few command normals, specifically his back and 1 and forward and 2, and his grabs outside of 2 and 4. 2 and 4 has got an awkward startup and range, making it quite sneaky, but the rest of Giga's throws lack in range. Unless you're right on top of your opponent, you're better off going into targets or dial-up, which, to be fair, is what you should be going into anyway. Oh, middle of the pack, Rexy is a solid choice for a beginner, as while she, or he, I assume it's Rexy, it could be Buck or Doe, doesn't excel in anything, she doesn't lack in any spot. Of all the dinosaurs, Rexy and Acro have unique target combos. They might be Magic Series, I get the two terms mixed up, specific to them, as Rexy can chain 1, 2, and 4 together for an around 4-hit combo. Outside of that, solid grabs, some tricky command normals to throw in for mix-ups, and 2 of the best dial-ins in the entire game. All that she really lacks is pokes. Her moves are stubby to say the least, with her crouching attacks lacking vital range to make them effective. The speed on her down moves are pitiful as well, getting beaten out by the likes of her contemporaries like Giga and Alberto, but once she gets in, she can wreak all sorts of havoc. Rexy's ruthless rushdown is rallied behind her ridiculous dash attacks that more than close the distance and set up her Oki. By the way, I mentioned Alberto earlier. Yeah, he's exactly like Giga with, I think, a few tweaks here and there, so yeah. I don't know which one of them is the new cat or not, but both Giga and Alberto can stomp you flat with ease. While I may not enjoy playing as Styrak, he has the best starter for his dial-in combos, as his forward and 1 is a quick 2-hit command normal that can be thrown out whenever the opponent is close. That and his crouching attacks, the most literal of pokes because he really does just jab his horn at the enemy. Too bad he suffers in way too many other areas to be as effective, something that Trike shares in spades, except he is worse. While I'm giving credit to dinosaurs I don't like playing and would consider low tier, Inky might blow huge mounds of Triceratops crap, but he does feel unique amongst the cast due to his tail attacks and their odd delays. All his proper command normals require either holding back or hit down then back and a button. It gets across that he's a more defensive fighter, the Guile or Leo of the game, which would be a fun playstyle if Warpath had a bit more depth and went full out with the character archetypes. Of all the dinosaurs in the game, however, Sucho is my favorite to play as and would be considered my main. Long-reaching attacks with neutral 2 that build rage and target into itself, rampage attacks that cover a wide swath of space, a deceptively quick dash attack, 2 dial-ins that are the simplest to keep the structure of, and one of the best throws in the game as it keeps an opponent close and primed for some follow-ups. He is a joy to play as. Away from the fighting game specifics, I do like the idea of the edibles and environmental hazards as Warpath-specific mechanics. It gives the fights this scrappy feel, as if 2 animals are taking advantage of any and all assets around them to gain the upper hand. This isn't a contest, but a fight for survival, so cheap tactics like using piles of rocks or leftover explosives to eating a smaller animal to keep fighting form feel completely valid. I wish Warpath dove headfirst into this as its selling point, because it would have been ahead of the curve. While party fighters like Smash and Power Stone do love their items, the only serious fighters I can think of that include background elements as usable fixtures are Injustice and modern Mortal Kombat. It does add a layer to combat and makes each stage that bit more special, as it opens up options only available to an arena, like continuing a string or escaping from pressure. Maybe you could have a power generator in a stage that keeps electric fences active that can be destroyed to disable the hazard, or have a hanging car act as a massive damage spike by knocking it out of the tree it's stuck in. Maybe have a few stage transitions here and there, like from the T-Rex pen to the jungle below, or the Welcome Center atrium to the labs. Take these iconic moments from the movies and books and make them interactables. A key component of any good fighting game is snappiness. Well, unless you're going for a hellish court-style dueling simulator which revels in methodicalness, which is self-explanatory for why buttons might be a bit on the slower end, but for the average plain Jane entry into the genre, you want buttons and inputs that don't feel stasis-locked. Responsiveness is a requirement, nay, the bare minimum. Look at any giant in the field and you'll see that common through line. Even if you were to venture into wilder meadows, good feeling buttons and controls still keep the grass green as the woods get thicker. From King of Fighters to Mortal Kombat or even Dive Kick to Melty Blood, feel of control outside having any knowledge of how each game breaks down is the first contact between player and game. It surprises me the faults of Warpath's system because it's a heady mixture of loose and stiff. After my extended period with the game, including cleaning arcade ladders multiple times because I had recording technical difficulties, which all you get for completion is an ad for a Universal Studio attraction, I had to pop in Tekken 3 to see if my mind didn't get sucked out my asshole. It hadn't. There is a sludgy mire covering the gameplay of Warpath that needs to be played to be believed. It's why I have a hard time considering the just frame moves as such, because Warpath does just casually eat inputs, or fails to recognize when one is properly inputted. On a sizable amount of occasions, Warpath would fail to read an input even though I was performing the action properly. Raptor and Spino's forward and 3 and Sucho's forward and 1 failed a few number of times, even though it is the simplest of inputs. In that same breath, it has no qualms with the non-command normal dial-ins like Rex or Gigas, making my comment about the slip and stiff nature of the game realized. I don't know if this is because of how Warpath reads button presses and stick position, or if it wants to play slowly on a deliberate front, but man does it suck when you go to do a move or perform an action and not get it out. I want to say it's the former at fault because when you do crouching moves, If you let the stick return to neutral but continue to press face buttons, you'll continue to crouch for as long as Warpath reads an attack input. Or what feels like it. I don't know. It's hard to explain because there is a disconnect between what you are inputting and what the game is reading. Weird issues like this and how the auto-turn in Warpath is atrocious. Auto-turn in 3D fighters allows you to focus on your opponent and make sure your attacks, land. It's typically quick as seen in Tekken, where a quick step dodge feels earned because you reacted properly, giving you a backdoor entrance to smash open with a combo. Warpaths, meanwhile, takes a full fortnight to recognize that you aren't facing your rival, and by then you've eaten a hit or two. To get a reset on the auto-turn in Warpath, you effectively have to stop doing everything, which leaves you a sitting duck feeding back into the top issue of Warpath's strange way of reading inputs. Not to refer back to Tekken, but even that game has options for when you aren't facing an opponent keeping up the mind game. Bringing me to the worst aspect of Warpath, Oki. Oki, or Okizeme, is integral to fighting games, as it is what allows a player to get back their turn when on the defensive, or push their advantage when putting on pressure. It's the combination of reading what your opponent might do in relation to what your options are when getting up from a knockdown. Rock, paper, scissors in the basest form. For Street Fighter, you have the likes of the Ukemi, Wake Up Special, EX or Super, Froze, and Jumps. Tekken has Ukemi, forward and backwards rolls, a variety of wake up attacks, and stand-up options. Without proper Oki, whoever gets knocked down first loses because they have no way of reacting to what their opponent might do. That is the death of fighting games. For those with imagination or experience, it'd be like fighting Geef in Street Fighter without being able to tech or jump away from his throws, so once he lands one knockdown, that's it. He just loops you with spinning pile drivers. That is the meta in Warpath. What makes dash attacks, throws, rampage attacks, and dial-in combos so good is that they're unblockable and untechable. All of them cause a hard knockdown and can be looped because on the defensive front, none of your options are great. There is Ukemi, fast get up, but the timing on it makes a just frame blush. With Tekken or other games, it's simple to do. As soon as your character hits the ground, you press a button for it. In Warpath, that isn't the case. You have to hit L1 or L2 after the dinosaur does its tumble animation and settles into the knockdown state. I think. I pulled off an Ukemi only twice during my time with Warpath, and both times I was confuzzled on how I did it. Repeating myself with how Warpath checks inputs, I may have just gotten lucky, as it's already hard to tell when to press the button for Ukemi. Not that it matters, Ukemi is so slow and goes a small amount of distance in Warpath that a dash attack will beat it out on reaction, with its large hitbox restarting the loop. Neutral stand-up is an awful choice because you aren't invulnerable when knocked down, so prepare to eat crouch attacks or dial-ins because they aren't hit confirm, and if you are hit while knocked down, you suffer hit stun. Oh yeah, and dash attacks and grabs beat out stand-ups on reaction because it takes an Ice Age to actually get up from a knockdown. Wake-up attacks, the last of the defense's actions, aren't much better as they still come out really slow that when you mash one out, the above what I said about stand-ups has happened. Ironically, the only bad option the aggressor has in Okizeme is the pin because it forces a neutral reset. Every other action an attacker has in an Oki situation is basically meaty with the lowest commitment possible and the highest damage output. This is the fatal flaw hanging above the whole title like the Sword of Damocles. One knockdown away from seeing your health get sliced in twain. It's an issue that permeates throughout the experience as it colors every detail a putrid shade of black. What makes most of the theropods good is because they either have easy access to their dial-ins, lacking any command normals as starters, or have good dash attacks or throws. Why go into Acro or Rexy's target combos when a dash attack or throw gives you so much more? It's why, for as much as I like Raptors, Spino, and Sucho, they suffer at the hands of the input reader making their dial-in situational. It's why Stiggy and Packy are beyond bottom tier as their dial-ins come out so slow, and they lack effective knockdown options that aren't just spam dash attacks or grabs. The core of this apple is rotten, and any good intention gets overshadowed by how busted the systems of Warpath are. And not busted in the fun way like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 or 3, where there's a lot to experiment with to see what works together, but busted in the SVC chaos way where nothing feels great except only the cheap and dirty tactics. Flowcharts, move properties, and priorities, learning the ins and outs of a character doesn't matter in Warpath because of the stranglehold that the Oki holds this game in. There's no reason to get good, lab out, or practice when the simplest tactic for every character is a loop that requires no mastery or thinking on the player's part. If I may continue to bring up other fighting games, I'm reminded of Heritage for the Future, the JoJo Capcom fighting game. Oki plays an important role in that title's metagame, as one of the best characters, Vanilla Ice, has unblockable mix-ups on Knockdown, but there are a variety of other factors in play. How stands work in Heritage, they negate knockdown and chip damage, Ice's own garbage specials and low stand gauge, the other characters and their playstyles like Polnareff or Jotaro, and obviously level of execution that don't make a knockdown a guaranteed win like how it is in Warpath. In the center of my mind's eye, the way I always viewed fighting games is that they are easy to pick up, hard to master, but Warpath disregards that with one of the worst Oki systems I've seen in a fighting game. Even with fighting games I dislike, like Smash Melee, there are dues I give it because of the technicality. And if I'm complimenting the competitive scene for Smash in comparison to a fighting game, there's a massive problem with the topic I'm covering. For sake of novelty, there is something to be had with Warpath. I don't know if it's ironic joy or schadenfreude when forcing your friends, bringing it over to get together so your pals can experience the title, but outside of that context, Warpath drops off quite hard. The controls are stodgy yet slippery, any level of depth is out the window, and the only thing going for the game is the gore and quality of the modeling and animation, because the Oki is pinning it down. For a 4-button fighter, just go play Tekken 3 or Tag Tournament. Both games are built off the same skeleton, but only one of them went extinct. It feels weird going from Kamen Rider Kuga to Warpath, as I can visually see the difference between the knowledge I had on fighting games then to now. Like how I know a lot more about Pokemon from when I covered Sapphire to today, as God, I don't understand how that series got popular outside of the monster collecting and raising aspect. Spaghetti Code is a light criticism. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, or don't. I ain't your Uncle June. And as always, this showing of Warpath Jurassic Park is over, but stay tuned for our next feature, the rhythm-based send-up to stick figure fighting, One Finger Death Punch.